Rancher gave his only horse to a wounded Apache woman. What she offered him was beyond imagination. The sun had barely started its climb over the horizon when the rancher stepped out of his small cabin, feeling the familiar warmth of the morning on his weathered face. The land stretched endlessly around him, rolling hills dotted with scrub and dry grass, the occasional tree casting long shadows over the dusty ground. This was his home, his world, and every inch of it he knew as well as the lines on his own hands. The rancher had lived on this land all his life, tending to the cattle, mending fences, and caring for his animals. But more than anything, he cherished his horse, a strong and loyal creature that had been with him through countless days of hard work and quiet solitude. That horse was not just an animal to him. It was a companion, a friend, and a partner who understood him in ways few people ever could. As he saddled his horse for the morning ride, the rancher could feel the gentle shift of its muscles beneath him, the familiar warmth and steady rhythm that had comforted him through lonely days. He rode out toward the hills to check on the cattle grazing near the creek, the soft sound of hooves against the dry earth echoing through the quiet morning. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wild grass and distant pine. Birds were beginning to stir, their songs weaving a delicate harmony over the vast open land. It was a peaceful morning, one that promised nothing more than the slow, predictable rhythm of ranch life. But life, as he had learned long ago, often had a way of surprising even the most cautious men. As he crested a small rise, scanning the herd in the distance, he noticed something that made him halt abruptly. Near the edge of the creek, partially hidden among the rocks and wild shrubs, lay a figure. At first he thought it might be a fallen traveler, perhaps someone who had lost their way. But as he drew closer, his heart tightened. It was a woman, and she was badly wounded. Blood had stained her clothes, and her breathing came in shallow, uneven bursts. Her long hair, dark as the night, was matted with dirt and sweat, clinging to her face. She tried to lift herself, but her strength was failing, and she collapsed back onto the ground. The rancher dismounted, his mind racing with caution and concern. He knew the land was dangerous, not just because of wild animals, but because of the tensions between settlers and the native tribes in the area. Yet despite every warning his mind whispered, his heart told him the same thing. She needed help. He approached slowly, speaking in a calm, low voice so as not to startle her. "Hey there, you're hurt. Can you hear me?" he asked. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment the world seemed to pause. There was fear there, yes, but also a desperate plea for help that pierced through the rancher's cautious exterior. She tried to speak, but the words were weak and broken, carried away by the wind before they reached him. He could see the bruises on her arms, the cuts on her legs, and the dirt covering her skin. She had been through something terrible, something that had left her on the brink of death. Without a second thought, he knelt beside her, examining her injuries. He knew he had to act quickly if she was to survive. He gently lifted her into his arms, careful not to worsen the wounds, and carried her back toward his cabin. Every step was heavy, but he didn't complain. The rancher had spent his life working with animals and people, and he had learned the value of patience and strength. He whispered words of reassurance as he walked, though he knew she might not understand them. The important thing was that she felt safety, even if only for a moment. When he finally reached his cabin, he laid her on a bed of blankets, careful to support her head and limbs. He fetched water and some herbs he used for minor injuries, doing everything he could to clean and dress her wounds. The work was slow, meticulous, and exhausting, but he didn't pause. Every cut, every bruise, told a story of pain and endurance, and he treated each one with care. During the first hours, she remained mostly unconscious, drifting in and out of awareness, but occasionally her eyes would open, meeting his with a mixture of fear and curiosity. She tried to speak, murmuring words he could not understand, and though the language barrier frustrated him, he could sense the gratitude behind her attempts. It was in the way her fingers twitched toward him, in the slight nod of her head. The rancher worked through the night, tending to her as best he could. He had no formal training beyond the knowledge handed down by his father and neighbors, but he knew enough to stabilize her. He mixed herbal poultices for the wounds, cleaned the cuts, and made sure she had water to drink. All the while he kept talking, telling her about the land, the cattle, and the horse waiting outside. Whether she understood the words or not, the sound of his voice seemed to comfort her, a constant reminder that she was no longer alone. By morning, she had regained enough strength to sit up slightly, leaning against the blankets. She looked at him with eyes that told a story he could never fully know, a story of struggle, survival, and resilience. She was alone in the world, separated from her tribe, wounded and vulnerable. Yet in her gaze, there was also a spark, a quiet strength that refused to be extinguished. The rancher felt a strange connection to her in that moment. He had spent so many years in solitude, relying on no one but himself and his horse. Yet here was someone whose presence demanded compassion, whose survival depended on his willingness to act. He realized that life was not just about endurance or strength, it was about the choices one made when faced with unexpected moments. And this, he knew, was one of those moments. Over the next few days, he continued to care for her, providing food and clean water, and tending to her wounds as they slowly began to heal. He introduced her to the cabin's small comforts, a soft blanket, a warm fire, and the quiet rhythm of life on the ranch. He could see her strength returning bit by bit, each day bringing a new spark of life. They didn't need words to communicate. Their actions and gestures spoke volumes. He brought her water when she was thirsty, shared bread when she was hungry, and offered reassurance when pain threatened to overwhelm her. Through these small acts, a bond began to form, fragile but unmistakable. The rancher found himself thinking about her even when he was away with the cattle, worrying about her well-being and hoping she would gain enough strength to move freely again. And though he had never admitted it, he began to feel something unfamiliar, a deep sense of responsibility, a desire to protect someone who had no one else. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a brilliant shade of orange and red, he brought her outside. The breeze was cool against their skin, and the distant sound of cattle moving through the valley filled the air. He helped her sit under the wide branches of an old oak tree, and for the first time in days, she smiled. It was a small, fleeting expression, but it was enough to fill his heart with hope. "Tomorrow, you'll be stronger," he said softly. "And you'll need to walk again, maybe even ride." Her eyes widened slightly at the mention of riding, and she looked toward the cabin where his horse was tied. He could see the unspoken question in her gaze, the one that asked if she could ever be free, mobile, and safe again. He knew then that the horse was not just an animal. It was a lifeline, a means for her to survive once she left his care. And as he looked at her, fragile yet determined, he made a choice he had never imagined he would make. He would give her his horse. It was not an easy decision. The horse had been his companion through countless hardships, a partner in the solitude and trials of ranch life. To part with it felt like losing a part of himself. Yet when he looked at the woman, seeing her need, her bravery, and her trust, he realized that the horse could mean the difference between life and death for her. And in that moment, he understood a truth he had always known, but rarely acted upon. True generosity was not measured by what one kept, but by what one gave. He knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on hers. Though they spoke different languages, he could see that she understood the meaning behind the gesture. He would give her the horse, and nothing would be asked in return, except that she survive and live to see another day. The spark in her eyes grew brighter, a mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and hope. For the rancher, it was a moment of quiet reflection. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, both for him and for her. But as he prepared for the morning when she would ride away, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had acted with courage, compassion, and humanity, and in doing so had changed both their lives forever. And so, on that quiet, sun-drenched morning, in the vast rugged land he called home, a simple act of kindness began a story that neither the rancher nor the woman could have ever imagined. A story of survival, trust, and the extraordinary power of giving without expectation. The morning sun had just begun to warm the rugged hills when the rancher led his horse out of the small corral. The animal's coat gleamed in the early light, muscles shifting under its skin as it nickered softly, sensing the presence of its master. The rancher had spent years training this horse, guiding it through the harsh terrain and sharing countless quiet moments during long, lonely days. It had always been more than just a horse to him. It was a companion, a friend, and a source of comfort that needed no words. Now, standing before him was the wounded woman. She had regained enough strength to sit upright, though every movement seemed to cost her effort. Her dark eyes held both fear and curiosity as she looked at the horse, as if she could sense the bond it shared with the man standing beside it. She could barely speak, but the rancher could see the question in her gaze. Could she really ride such a magnificent creature? Could she trust it, and him, to carry her safely into the unknown? The rancher knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. "You need this," he said simply. "It will help you get around and keep you safe. It's the only way you can travel quickly until you are stronger." The woman blinked at him, her lips parting as though to protest, but no words came. Perhaps she did not understand his language, or perhaps the gravity of his gesture left her speechless. Slowly, she reached out a trembling hand to touch the horse's nose. The animal sniffed her fingers, lowering its head gently, as if sensing her need. Her hand lingered for a moment, brushing over its soft muzzle. In that instant, a silent connection was formed, an unspoken understanding between her and the creature that had been the rancher's closest companion. He looked at her, gauging her reaction. "It's yours now," he said, his voice steady but filled with quiet emotion. "Take it. It will help you survive." Her eyes widened in disbelief. She looked from the horse to the rancher, then back to the horse again, as if trying to grasp the meaning of his words. The rancher could see the fear and uncertainty flickering across her face. She had been through so much, yet here was a man who, without hesitation, was offering her the one thing he held most dear. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rancher could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, a mixture of loss and hope swirling together in his chest. This horse had been his companion through countless hardships, a loyal partner in solitude, and now he was giving it away. Yet, as he watched the woman's reaction, he realized that what mattered most was not his loss, but her chance at survival. Finally, she nodded slowly, her fingers brushing against the horse's mane. She lowered her body toward it, her movements cautious, unsure. The rancher guided her hand to the reins, showing her how to hold them. He helped her place her leg over the horse, steadying her as she climbed into the saddle. Her body tensed with each movement, but she trusted him, trusting the quiet strength in his voice and the gentle patience in his hands. Once she was seated, the rancher stepped back and watched. The horse stood quietly beneath her, unflinching, sensing the urgency of the moment. The woman's hands trembled slightly on the reins, and she looked to the rancher for reassurance. He gave her a small nod, and she returned it with a determined, tentative smile. Then, with a soft nudge, the horse began to move, first slowly, then with steady confidence. The woman's posture shifted, her grip loosening as she began to find balance, and for the first time in days, a spark of hope lit up her eyes. Over the next few hours, the rancher remained by her side, guiding her through the open hills. He showed her how to feel the rhythm of the horse, how to anticipate its movements, and how to steer it safely over the uneven ground. She listened carefully, absorbing every instruction, her body gradually regaining strength and confidence. With each step, the bond between the woman and the horse deepened, a quiet partnership forming that spoke louder than words ever could. During breaks, she would dismount, kneeling on the ground to rest, while the rancher tended to her minor aches and encouraged her to drink water and eat the simple food he offered. She would smile at him then, a small gesture that conveyed immense gratitude. Though they could not share words easily, their actions spoke volumes. She had no home to return to, no family nearby, and yet here was a man who had given her a gift that could save her life. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the rancher noticed how the woman began to move with more confidence. She guided the horse over small rocks, across shallow streams, and along narrow paths with growing skill. Each successful maneuver brought a smile to her face, and even a small laugh escaped her lips as she realized the freedom the horse gave her. The rancher felt a deep satisfaction, seeing her regain strength and courage. He knew that he had made the right choice, even if it had cost him dearly. In the evenings, they would return to the rancher's cabin, where he would continue tending to her wounds and provide a simple meal. They shared quiet moments by the fire, and though the language barrier remained, they communicated through gestures, expressions, and a shared understanding of gratitude. The rancher began to learn small words from her language, and she learned a few English words, bridging the gap between their worlds. Their friendship grew stronger, built on trust, kindness, and the silent acknowledgement of the hardships each had endured. The woman, though still recovering, began to share fragments of her story. She had been traveling with her tribe when they were attacked by raiders. She had been separated from them during the chaos and left to fend for herself. She had fought to survive, relying on her instincts and courage, but the injuries she sustained had made it impossible to continue alone. Hearing this, the rancher felt a mixture of sorrow and admiration. She was a remarkable woman, resilient and brave, and yet she had been thrust into unimaginable circumstances. One evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and purple, the woman approached the rancher with a small bundle she had tied to her saddle. Though he could not understand her words, he could feel the meaning behind her gestures. She offered it to him with both hands, a simple act of gratitude that moved him deeply. Inside the bundle were small handcrafted items, woven bracelets, carefully carved figures, and medicinal herbs. These were gifts from her culture, tokens of appreciation for the life he had given her. The rancher accepted them with humility, realizing that what she offered was far beyond any material repayment. It was a gesture that came from the heart, reflecting her respect and acknowledgement of his selflessness. Days turned into weeks as the rancher continued to teach her how to ride, care for the horse, and navigate the land safely. He shared his knowledge of the terrain, the hidden paths, and the behavior of wild animals. She listened intently, absorbing every detail, and with each lesson her confidence grew. The horse became not just a means of transportation, but a symbol of freedom, survival, and the extraordinary kindness of a man she barely knew. Through this time together, the rancher reflected on the meaning of generosity and trust. He had given away something precious without expecting anything in return, and in doing so, he had opened a door to a connection that transcended language, culture, and circumstance. He realized that true acts of kindness often came with no guarantee of reward, yet the impact they had could ripple far beyond what one could imagine. The woman, too, began to understand the depth of his generosity. She had been given a chance at life, mobility, and hope in the face of despair. She would carry this lesson with her always, honoring the man who had risked his own loss to ensure her survival. In her eyes, he was not just a stranger. He was a protector, a friend, and someone whose humanity shone brighter than the harshest sun over the open plains. By the time she was ready to leave the ranch for longer journeys, the woman had become skilled in handling the horse, strong enough to travel safely, and wise enough to appreciate the lessons she had learned. She looked back at the rancher with a mixture of sadness and gratitude, understanding that their paths were about to diverge but that the bond they shared would remain unbroken. The rancher, watching her ride away, felt a complex mix of emotions. He would miss the horse, of course, and the quiet companionship it had provided. Yet he knew he had done something greater than holding on to material possession. He had saved a life, nurtured hope, and witnessed the resilience of a human spirit in its most vulnerable yet courageous state. And as the woman disappeared into the distance, guided by the trusted horse, the rancher remained on the hilltop. Gazing at the horizon, he understood that life had a way of teaching lessons through unexpected encounters, that generosity could change the course of destiny, and that even the smallest acts of kindness could have immeasurable impact. In those moments of quiet reflection, the rancher realized that giving someone the means to survive and thrive was the greatest gift of all. And he knew that this story of a man, a woman, and a horse was only just beginning. The morning air was crisp and bright as the rancher watched the woman prepare for her journey. She had grown stronger over the past days, her wounds healing and her spirit lifting with every sunrise. The horse, once his companion, now carried a new weight of purpose, its rider not just learning to guide it, but depending on it for safety, freedom, and survival. The rancher felt a deep mix of pride and sorrow as he observed the quiet determination in her movements. Today marked the day she would leave the familiar safety of his ranch and venture into the vast unknown. He had spent countless hours training her, teaching her to trust the horse, to feel its rhythm, and to navigate the rugged terrain. She had absorbed every lesson with remarkable patience and courage. Even the smallest of hills or rocky paths no longer frightened her. She had learned to anticipate the horse's movements, to adjust her balance, and to read the subtle signs that indicated when the animal was nervous or unsure. Every morning she had grown a little braver, and every evening she had returned to the rancher with a quiet sense of accomplishment. Now, standing by the stable, she adjusted the saddle one last time, making sure the straps were secure and the blankets beneath it were comfortable. She ran her fingers over the horse's mane, whispering softly to it, words the rancher could not understand, yet the tone carried a tenderness that was unmistakable. The horse nickered in response, its eyes calm and trusting, sensing the bond that had grown over the days of training and care. The rancher approached her slowly, his boots crunching on the dry earth. He carried a small satchel of food, water, and medicinal herbs he thought might be useful for her journey. "You'll need these," he said, handing the satchel to her. "The road is long, and you must take care of yourself." She accepted the satchel with both hands, bowing her head slightly in gratitude. There was no need for words. Her actions spoke louder than any language could convey. The rancher nodded, understanding the weight of this moment. They had formed a bond that went beyond words, a connection built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. And now they would be separated, each returning to their own path. For a long moment they stood in silence, the wind rustling the leaves of a nearby oak tree, carrying with it the scent of wild grass and distant flowers. The rancher's mind wandered through memories of the past days, tending to her wounds, guiding her through the hills, and witnessing her courage as she overcame every obstacle. He thought of the nights spent by the fire, sharing quiet companionship without the need for conversation, and the mornings when the sun had risen over the vast landscape, bathing everything in gold. Finally, the woman swung her leg over the horse and settled into the saddle. She adjusted the reins, her posture confident and steady. The rancher held his breath as she gave the horse a gentle nudge, testing its response. The animal responded smoothly, stepping forward with measured grace. She looked back at him once more, her dark eyes filled with gratitude, respect, and a hint of sadness. He gave her a small nod, and she returned it with a determined smile. As she began to ride away, the rancher felt a tug in his heart, a mixture of pride and loss. He had given her the horse, his most cherished companion, and now she was leaving, venturing into the unknown. Yet he knew that he had done the right thing. He had provided her with the means to survive, to travel safely, and to reclaim some measure of freedom after the hardships she had endured. The woman rode steadily, her confidence growing with each step. The horse responded to her touch, its movements smooth and assured. She navigated the hills and valleys with skill, following the paths the rancher had taught her, yet also trusting her instincts. Every so often she would glance back, her eyes meeting his from a distance, sharing a silent farewell. The rancher waved, his hand trembling slightly, and she responded with a subtle nod, acknowledging the unspoken bond between them. As she disappeared into the horizon, the rancher remained on the hilltop, watching until she was nothing more than a small figure against the vast landscape. The wind carried away the dust of her passage, and the silence returned, deeper and more profound than before. He felt the emptiness of the ranch without the presence of the woman, without the companionship that had brightened his days and warmed his nights. Yet he also felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had made a difference in someone's life, that he had offered hope and safety when it was needed most. In the days that followed, the rancher returned to his routines, tending to the cattle, repairing fences, and caring for the land. Yet his thoughts often drifted to the woman and the horse. He wondered how she was faring, whether she had encountered challenges or danger along the way. He imagined her riding through the hills, free and strong, carrying with her the lessons he had taught and the kindness he had shown. Word of his act spread slowly through the nearby towns and ranches. Neighbors and travelers spoke of the man who had given his only horse to a wounded stranger, a tale of courage and generosity that inspired admiration and respect. Some found it reckless, others foolish, Yet the rancher knew that it had been the right choice. He had acted from the heart, without expectation of reward or recognition, and in doing so he had touched a life in a way that could never be measured. As the weeks passed, the rancher found comfort in small reminders of the woman's presence. The herbs she had left, the woven bracelets, and the small carved figures she had gifted him were tokens of gratitude that spoke of her respect and acknowledgement. They were not just objects, they were symbols of the bond they had formed, a reminder that acts of kindness could create connections that transcended language, culture, and circumstance. The rancher often reflected on the lessons he had learned from the encounter. He realized that generosity was not simply about giving material possessions, but about offering support, protection, and hope when it was most needed. He understood that trust and compassion could bridge the widest gaps, connecting people who might otherwise remain strangers. And he recognized that even the smallest gestures, an act of care, a guiding hand, a gift offered without expectation, could ripple outward, leaving an impact far greater than one could imagine. Though life on the ranch returned to its usual rhythm, the memory of the woman and the horse lingered in the rancher's mind. He thought of her riding through the hills, free and capable, and felt a quiet pride in the role he had played in her survival. He knew that she carried with her not just the horse, but the lessons of resilience, trust, and courage that they had shared, and he hoped that, wherever her journey took her, she would remember the kindness of a stranger who had seen her worth and given her the means to continue living. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, the rancher sat on the porch of his cabin, gazing out at the endless hills. The land seemed both vast and intimate, filled with memories of the past days and the promise of the future. He thought of the woman, the horse, and the bond they had shared, and felt a deep sense of peace. He had faced a choice that demanded courage and selflessness, and he had acted in a way that honored both his humanity and hers. In that quiet moment, he realized that life was shaped not only by the challenges one faced, but by the choices made in response to them. Acts of kindness, even when risky or costly, had the power to change lives in ways that could never be anticipated. And in giving without expectation, one could discover a deeper sense of purpose, fulfillment, and connection. The rancher knew that the woman's journey was only beginning, that the horse would carry her through many trials and triumphs, and that she would grow stronger with each passing day. And though they were now separated by distance, the bond they had formed remained unbroken, a testament to the enduring power of generosity, trust, and shared humanity. As night fell and the stars appeared over the vast plains, the rancher felt a quiet hope. He knew that the woman was out there, navigating the world with courage and skill, guided by the lessons he had taught and the kindness he had shown. And he understood, in the deepest part of his heart, that sometimes the most profound journeys began with a simple act of giving, an act that could transform not just one life, but the lives of many, echoing across time and space in ways that were truly beyond imagination. Weeks passed quietly on the ranch. The sun rose and set over the rolling hills, the cattle moved slowly through the pastures, and the rancher continued his daily routines, tending to fences, feeding the animals, and maintaining the land he had called home all his life. Yet, no matter how busy he kept himself, he could not shake the thought of the woman who had ridden away on his horse. Every day his mind wandered to the image of her riding across the hills, free and strong, carrying with her the lessons he had taught and the gift he had given. He often wondered how she fared. Had she found shelter? Had she encountered danger on the rugged paths she now traveled alone? Despite the distance, he hoped she was safe, and he prayed quietly that the kindness he had offered would carry her through the challenges ahead. Then, one bright morning, as he was checking the fences near the edge of the ranch, he heard the faint sound of hooves approaching. At first he thought it might be one of his neighbors or a traveler passing by. But as the sound grew closer, a feeling of surprise and anticipation ran through him. Squinting against the sunlight, he saw a small cloud of dust rising in the distance, and within it, a familiar figure appeared, riding his horse. His heart skipped a beat. It was the woman. But she was not alone. Behind her, moving steadily, came a group of people, their expressions calm yet purposeful. They were members of her tribe, the Apache, come to show their gratitude and respect. The rancher could hardly believe his eyes. The woman had returned, not just for herself, but with her people, bringing with them a presence and a strength that was both awe-inspiring and humbling. The woman guided the horse toward the rancher, her movements confident and deliberate. She dismounted gracefully, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of respect, gratitude, and quiet pride. She had grown stronger, more assured, and her presence radiated a calm authority that spoke of resilience and courage. The rancher stepped forward, unsure what to expect, but prepared to greet her warmly. She handed him a small bundle, wrapped carefully in cloth. Inside were gifts, tokens of appreciation crafted with care and skill. There were woven blankets with intricate patterns, bracelets of colorful beads, and small carved figures representing animals and symbols important to her culture. Alongside these were herbs, seeds, and other practical items, chosen thoughtfully to reflect both respect and gratitude. The rancher accepted the gifts with humility, touched deeply by the thoughtfulness and generosity behind them. But the woman's offering did not end there. She spoke to the rancher in her language, and though he could not understand the words, the tone conveyed sincerity, respect, and a profound acknowledgement of what he had done. One of her people translated, telling the rancher that they had come to honor him for his courage, his generosity, and the life he had saved. The rancher felt a lump in his throat. He had not expected this. He had acted without expectation, giving his horse simply to help someone in need. Yet now he was being honored in a way that went far beyond anything he could have imagined. The Apache band settled near the ranch, their presence commanding, yet respectful. They moved with quiet dignity, observing the land and the rancher with a mixture of curiosity and appreciation. The woman introduced the rancher to her people, and through gestures, translation, and shared smiles, a bridge was formed between two very different worlds. It was a meeting of trust, gratitude, and mutual respect, a connection that transcended language and culture. The rancher showed them the ranch, pointing out the pastures, the fences, and the small cabin that had been his home for so many years. They listened attentively, asking questions through the woman and her translators, their eyes wide with interest and respect. In return, they shared stories of their travels, their traditions, and the challenges they faced. The rancher was fascinated, learning about their ways of life, their customs, and the strength of their community. Each story deepened his admiration for them, and he began to understand the depth of what had been offered to him in return, not just gifts, but knowledge, trust, and a bond that could endure. The woman herself spoke little, choosing her moments carefully, her eyes always returning to the rancher with a mixture of gratitude and quiet pride. She had carried his gift faithfully, treating the horse with care and respect, and now she had returned to ensure he understood the depth of her appreciation. Her actions spoke louder than words ever could. She had brought not only her people but also a piece of her world, sharing with him the richness of her culture and the respect she felt for the life he had saved. Over the following days, the rancher and the Apache band worked together, sharing meals, tending to the animals, and exchanging skills and knowledge. The rancher taught them about the land, the cattle, and the routines of ranch life, while they shared their techniques for survival, their understanding of the terrain, and their knowledge of herbs and natural remedies. The exchange was more than practical. It was a meeting of minds, a blending of experience and culture that enriched both sides. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of gold and violet, the woman approached the rancher once more. She handed him a beautifully crafted saddle, adorned with intricate patterns and symbols from her culture. "This is for you," she said through translation, "so that you may always remember that kindness is never forgotten." The rancher held the saddle in his hands, feeling the weight not just of the craftsmanship but of the thought, respect, and gratitude that went into it. He could not find words to express the depth of his feelings, but his eyes conveyed what his heart could not say. In that moment he understood something profound. Generosity, trust, and kindness could create connections that were stronger than any material bond. One act of selflessness had bridged worlds, forged friendships, and left an impact that would last a lifetime. As the days passed, the Apache band prepared to leave, their mission of gratitude fulfilled. The rancher walked with the woman and her people to the edge of his land, watching as they mounted their horses and prepared to continue their journey. He felt a mixture of sadness and awe, knowing that he would miss their presence, yet understanding that the bond they had formed would endure beyond physical distance. Before they departed, the woman turned to him one last time. Her eyes met his, and in that silent gaze, they shared everything that words could not capture: respect, gratitude, understanding, and a shared sense of humanity. She nodded, and he nodded in return, both of them aware that this moment, though fleeting, was significant beyond measure. The horses began to move, and soon the woman and her people disappeared into the horizon, leaving the rancher standing alone once more. Yet he did not feel emptiness. Instead, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a quiet joy that came from knowing he had acted with courage and compassion. He had given without expectation, and in return he had received something far greater than he could have imagined: respect, friendship, and a lasting connection across worlds. As he watched the dust rise behind them, carried away by the wind, the rancher reflected on the journey that had brought them together. He thought of the initial encounter, the care he had provided, the lessons he had taught, and the trust that had grown between them. And he realized that life's most meaningful moments often came unexpectedly, shaped not by wealth, power, or status, but by the willingness to act with kindness, courage, and selflessness. The rancher returned to his cabin as the sun dipped below the hills, carrying with him the gifts, memories, and lessons of the past days. He placed the handmade saddle carefully inside, alongside the woven blankets and carved figures, each item a reminder of the extraordinary generosity of the woman and her people. He understood that these objects were more than gifts. They were symbols of a bond forged in trust, compassion, and mutual respect, a bond that could never be broken by distance or time. In the quiet of the evening, as stars began to appear over the vast plains, the rancher felt a sense of peace, unlike anything he had known before. The woman and her people had shown him that true generosity and gratitude went far beyond material wealth. They were measured by actions, intentions, and the willingness to honor the humanity of another. And he knew that this lesson would remain with him forever, guiding him in every choice he made and every life he touched. The memory of the woman, the horse, and the Apache band became a story he would carry for the rest of his days, a story of courage, compassion, and the extraordinary power of giving without expectation. It was a reminder that even in a harsh and unforgiving world, acts of kindness could create ripples that reached far beyond imagination, connecting hearts and shaping destinies in ways that no one could foresee. After the Apache band departed, the rancher stood on the hilltop overlooking his land, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the pastures. The dust from their passing had settled, and the hills returned to their quiet rhythm. Yet the memory of their visit lingered like a warm presence around him. He could still see the woman riding her horse, leading her people through the golden landscape, her figure steady and confident, carrying with her the strength and gratitude that had touched his heart so deeply. The rancher felt a profound sense of peace, the kind that comes not from accomplishments or wealth, but from knowing one has acted rightly and with purpose. He thought about the first day he had found her, wounded and alone, barely able to stand. How fragile she had seemed then, how uncertain, how in need of help. And now she had returned, not as a helpless stranger, but as a strong, capable woman, carrying the respect and admiration of her people, and offering gifts that reflected their gratitude. It was more than he could have imagined, and yet it was exactly what he had hoped for in his heart. Over the next several weeks, the rancher noticed subtle changes in himself. He walked through his daily routines with a lighter heart. Tending to the cattle, mending fences, and caring for the land all remained the same. But he found joy in small things he had often overlooked: the sound of the wind rustling through the grass, the sun glinting on the river, and the soft whinny of a horse greeting him in the morning. Each reminder brought him back to the lessons he had learned from the woman and her people: that life was precious, that acts of kindness mattered, and that connections could span even the widest divides. He took the handcrafted gifts she had left and placed them in a special corner of his cabin. The woven blankets became a source of comfort on cold nights, the carved feathers a reminder of the beauty and skill of another culture, and the herbs and seeds a symbol of the practical wisdom she had shared. Every item told a story, each one a chapter in a tale of trust, courage, and gratitude. He often touched them, tracing the intricate patterns with his fingers, recalling the look in her eyes when she handed them to him. Those moments were etched into his memory, more vivid than the sunrises he had watched from his porch or the quiet nights by the fire. The rancher also reflected deeply on the horse, his most cherished companion, now serving as a lifeline for the woman. He realized that letting go of the horse had not been a loss. It had been an investment in life, a way to ensure that someone in need had the means to survive and thrive. Watching her ride, free and confident, had been a reward beyond measure. It taught him that sometimes the most valuable things one can give are not objects, but opportunities, freedom, and trust. Months passed, and the story of his generosity spread further across the nearby towns and settlements. Travelers spoke of the man who had given his horse to a wounded stranger, and how that simple act had inspired a remarkable return of gratitude and friendship. People who had once viewed him as quiet and solitary now looked at him with admiration. Yet, the rancher never sought recognition. For him, the true reward was the knowledge that he had acted with compassion and integrity, and that his actions had made a meaningful difference in another life. Even without words, the bond between him and the woman endured. Occasionally he imagined her riding across distant hills, her horse carrying her safely as she traveled to reunite with her tribe or explore new paths. He pictured her teaching others the lessons he had imparted, sharing the kindness she had received, and spreading hope in a world that often demanded resilience. In his heart, he knew that the ripple of generosity had extended far beyond that single encounter, touching lives in ways he could not see. One evening, as he watched the sunset over the hills, he thought about the lessons he had learned through this experience. Life was unpredictable, full of challenges, danger, and uncertainty. Yet, in the midst of such a harsh and demanding world, acts of selflessness could create beauty, hope, and connection. They could change destinies, bridge cultures, and transform ordinary people into heroes, not because of power or wealth, but because of courage, empathy, and the willingness to act. He also realized that trust was a gift, one that could bring extraordinary returns. By trusting the woman with his horse, he had shown faith in her judgment, resilience, and character. That trust had been honored in ways he could never have anticipated, through her careful handling of the horse, her respect for him, and the extraordinary act of returning with her people to offer gifts and gratitude. It was a lesson he carried forward in all his interactions, a reminder that giving trust freely could lead to bonds stronger than any material possession. The rancher began to share his story with others, not as a tale of heroism, but as a lesson in kindness and human connection. He spoke of the woman, her courage, and the extraordinary power of gratitude. He explained how one act of generosity, done without expectation, could ripple through lives in ways beyond imagination. Those who listened were inspired, learning that true strength lay not in dominance or control, but in compassion, humility, and the willingness to see another's need before one's own. The land seemed richer, not because of crops or cattle, but because of the memories and lessons it held. The rancher carried forward a new understanding of humanity, that even in isolation, one could make a profound difference in the world, and that the bonds formed through generosity and trust could endure across time, distance, and culture. Years later, when he told the story to young neighbors and travelers, he emphasized the quiet heroism found in everyday actions. He spoke not of the horse or the gifts, but of the choice to act with empathy, of the courage to extend help when it was needed most, and of the enduring power of gratitude. And in every telling, he saw the same spark in others' eyes that he had seen in the woman's. The recognition that simple acts of kindness could leave a legacy far beyond what anyone could imagine. The rancher often looked back on that summer with a deep sense of fulfillment. He had witnessed the strength of the human spirit, the beauty of cross-cultural respect, and the extraordinary outcomes of generosity. The woman's visit and the return of her people had shown him that life's most meaningful moments were often unexpected, born of courage, trust, and the willingness to give without expecting anything in return. And so, as the stars filled the night sky over his land, the rancher sat quietly on his porch, surrounded by the gifts, memories, and lessons of that extraordinary experience. The wind carried the scent of wild grass and distant flowers, and he felt the presence of the woman and her people in his heart. Their journey had intersected with his in a way that changed both their lives forever. He understood that generosity and kindness were not fleeting. They created bonds, inspired courage, and left a legacy that could last for generations. In the end, the rancher knew that the true reward of that summer was not the recognition, not the gifts, and not even the bond with the horse. It was the understanding that one act of compassion offered freely and without expectation could create ripples far beyond imagination. It could save a life, build trust, and transform the world around him in subtle, profound ways. And he carried that understanding with him always, letting it guide his actions, his choices, and the life he continued to live on the land he loved so dearly. Even in quiet moments, when the ranch was empty and the hills stretched endlessly into the horizon, he felt the echo of her presence, the courage, the gratitude, and the trust that had been shared. And he knew that the story of the wounded woman, the horse, and the generosity that bound them together would remain in his heart forever, a reminder of the extraordinary power of kindness and the enduring legacy of selfless action.